Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my complete review of Endwalker. We've now gotten all the major content for the expansion with the end of patch 6.55, and we're just waiting on a couple of little quality of life tidbits like the raid tier unlocking and the 14 and 16 collaboration, plus what other events they run in the meantime while we wait for Dawn Trail. So, having had plenty of time to look at everything, think about everything, digest everything from Endwalker, I'm ready to give a review of how I felt about everything, things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and things that I want to see improved as we go towards Dawn Trail. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So first, let's start with the story. Now, this is completely spoilers, so if you were hoping to get a spoiler-free review, I'm just going to warn you right now that that's not going to be the case. I am one of the people who's actually a fan of the cosmic threat level presented in the story in Endwalker. As a longtime Final Fantasy fan, it's that wild and out-of-nowhere kind of story that I kind of expect, while also being completely logical and answering a question that I've had about the story for years and have had theorized for years. What was the final days? I never felt like I kind of just got anywhere out of nowhere, and everything made logical sense to me going through. There were lots of amazing character moments, from Urian J confronting Mubrida's parents to revisiting the Ancients' era and getting to know Emmett, Hythlodaeus, and Vana, to even Xenos getting some pretty big exciting moments, especially near the end. The dungeons and trials throughout the story were back-to-back fun and at times horrifying, specifically thinking of Vanaspati, which I don't think I'll ever forget as a dungeon, at least in terms of what happens while you're in there, and the entire sequence of events story-wise around that. I mean, I still think of Matsuya running with the baby. Like, that's such a crazy scene. There's a few hiccups in the pacing for sure. There's like 40 to 50 hours of cutscenes and like 8 to 10 hours of actual gameplay, and that makes for some unusually slow moments in what feels like something that's really packed at the same time. It's kind of strange how they managed to achieve that, but hey, at the very least, if you're skipping the cutscenes on an alt, it makes getting to level 90 a lot faster. I do think I'm a bigger fan of the story than a lot of other people are, and it definitely gets a thumbs up from me. Though I'm excited to see their fresh take on Dawn Trail, not bogged down by 10 years of story that they have to kind of conclude on from before. As for the post-MSQ story, I'm again kind of more of a fan of this than I think a lot of people are. I like discovering more about the Void, as honestly, that's been one of my biggest interests throughout all the years. Every time we get something Void related, I'm always ready to jump on it, and I actually like Zero. Yes, she's pretty much a blank slate personality-wise, but we use her as a means of gaining perspective on the things that we take for granted, and we don't really think about it that much unless you try to empathize with the character and what they're going through in these moments, even if she herself has no empathy when we first meet her. She can appreciate as something as simple as a bowl of curry that's way too spicy or a hot steamed bun. She does have a few moments that don't land or are a little too generic, kind of cringe, but overall, I liked her. And also the renditions of the Final Fantasy IV bosses were great, and they still feel wholly unique to Final Fantasy XIV with the music that they do, the remixes, especially looking at Rubicante and Golbez and Zeramis even, and the extra character backstories that they were given as well really gives them just way more elements than they actually had in Final Fantasy IV. It did feel kind of weird getting the seemingly self-contained story in the MSQ itself, so I kind of hope it's, something they are going to revisit. It just, in 5-6 years, I might feel worse about this if we find out it really was just a side story as an entire expansion's post-main story quests. So the payoff better be there eventually, and we're definitely not done with the Void, so it should be. Speaking of those side stories, that was, for me, one of the best bits of this expansion. I loved Omega's little finale quest. I loved the tribal quest. Tataru's Endeavors has some insanely good and hilarious moments, looking at you, Suzaku. Hildebrand, this was top-notch Hildebrand if you're a fan of that series, and while the Manderville weapons I'll talk about later as weapons themselves, I did enjoy the mild amount of antics that came from it, especially the conclusion. Even things like custom deliveries in the Studium deliver on a pretty high note. The role quests I did feel were somewhat lacking, but it's a small blemish on a series of side stories I absolutely loved. Then we go into Pandemonium, one of my favorite raid series, even though it has some of the least fun Savage bosses I've ever fought. It acts as a proper epilogue to the story and far improves La Habrea as a character. Funnily enough, though, Elidibus is really the centerpiece of interest for me, and that's especially evident with the final scene. Now, while P6 and P7 are big misses in the raids, some of the least interesting Savage bosses of all time, everything else stands on its own pretty well. That's not to say there aren't some misses there. The second phase of P12S, I think, is vastly underwhelming compared to the first, and of course the balancing of P8S is definitely a topic to address. But I've rarely had this consistently of a good time through an entire expansion's 12 raid releases. I just wish that the worst bosses were more spread out and not like back to back, because it really kills Abyssos. Also, seeing an original story here makes me even more excited for the Arcadian and Dawntrail, and I think this is what they should do with 8-man raids going forward. Then we get to Myths of the Realm, which is kind of a double-edged sword for me. It's one of my favorite kind of fun time 24-mans. The fact that it's a really low-stakes story ends up allowing more time to just simply enjoy the reality of what's happening, what we're learning about. It really wants you to be more invested in the world's lore than in some cosmic or world-ending threat. The mysteries work well here, and while we all predicted some of the payoffs in the end, I felt like it was a good, again, kind of epilogue to one of the things left behind at the end of Endwalker. Unfortunately, boss-wise, it's one of the most underwhelming alliance raids of all of them. Aglaya, the first one, is unfortunately the peak, with Euphrosyne and Thalia being far less impressive. Yeah, there's a few cute things like being able to blow a kiss, but the entire series is just severely undertuned, skipping iconic attacks in the same expansion they released in. Fortunately, it has fantastic music and again the story I like, but man, the Final Fantasy XI raid better not be this easy. I don't think it should be that hard, but not this easy. Then we have Ultimates, two of the most grueling, difficult, game-changing Ultimates the game has ever seen. Now, DSR is largely beloved, and I have a great appreciation for it, even if I don't see myself doing it again anytime soon. Omega Protocol, I don't hate as much as everyone else does, mostly because I love the advancement of Omega as a character throughout, but it would be arrogant of me to call it good in the eyes of the public. It destroyed even more raid teams than DSR did, and it does so with for a lot of very good reasons. However, these two Ultimates were, even DSR as well, largely damaging to the raid scene at the time, and it really didn't help that they sandwiched Abyssos in between, which was also kind of another damaging one with some of the misbalances and whatnot. And, DSR, I'm going to say, is going to go down as an Ultimate that people will love going back to. Right now, it's already something that people are loving to go back to, and it's totally deserved given the pacing and given the mechanics and the story. It's such a mastercraft of Ultimates. And I think, like UCOB and T, it's going to be one people revisit often, but Top is always going to be a groaner, even after Gear invalidates the whole crit variance problem and the soul-battering doo-doo, which, let's be honest, no amount of Gear is going to stop you from hearing that. I'm scared for Eden Ultimate and Shadowbringers MSQ Ultimate after these two, because you have to imagine they're going to be harder. Then we move over to Variant and Criterion. Now, this is one of those great ideas, but missed execution style things. Variant's a really cool idea with the different paths and the puzzle solving for how to get to the true ending of the dungeon, but it lacks any long-term support. You'll do it the 12 times and just likely never do it again. And for all that effort, I just don't like that. And for Criterion, it is an insanely fresh and welcome hard mode dungeon design with massively underwhelming rewards. And Savage isn't really that creative. Don't die, you got a time limit, everything hits harder, but it suffers just as much from the reward problem until the final one, which, cool, but a little bit late. And even those are kind of weird, needing the tombstone weapons in their completed form before you can even actually exchange them for these upgraded ones if you have it. Hopefully they nail the rewards in Dawntrail and add some better replayability to the Variant dungeons, or we're going to have a bad time with these. Island Sanctuary, I think, is probably the biggest miss of the entire expansion. I mean, what could have been cool lifestyle content, tending to an island, is just a workshop simulator. Yeah, it makes good money if you put up with it, but man, it's just kind of a bummer. I wanted something more engaging. At least you can put minions and furnishings outside. That's nice. Eureka Orthos is kind of in a weird spot as well. While I'm glad to see Deep Dungeon return, and they did try some new things with the monster scaling and the stricter boss mechanics, the pacing and structure is just kind of odd. It's almost more boring than the other Deep Dungeons, and I didn't think you could do that. Dread Beasts are kind of an awkward addition. They're mostly objectives that you outright avoid unless you are wholly committing to using the resources to actually kill them, and normally that's involving just kind of one-tapping them before they can kill you back. There's not enough floor variety again, and that's actually a downgrade from Heaven on High. Yeah, it's got a really cool story. I like the bosses, especially the fact that Floor 99 has a boss. That was a great addition, but I just wish the progression wasn't so unsatisfying. Then we come to PvP. Now, normally you'd expect me to say a lot of bad things here, but Crystalline Conflict is a genuinely thrilling PvP addition that heavily revitalized my interest in PvP a great deal. I even got Crystal in the first season, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But it's really struggling in the rewards, a common theme throughout all of Endwalker. And entering the frame mid-season is torturous to even get a queue because of that. Series and seasons, while I like them both in idea, they need a name change. Please. Also, where are my series rewards returning? Are we really waiting till Dawn Trail for this? I mean, we have to be at this point. Come on, you said there wasn't going to be any FOMO with missing the series rewards. Not that I really want them, but I'm upset that there's been really no mention of when they're going to be returning in any capacity. Oh well, at least the Garo stuff is there. As for other PvP changes and adjustments, a lot of those I really wasn't a fan of. The Shatter map has never been my favorite, and the newer versions of it have gone even further away in that direction. Never really attached myself to Ansal Hakar, and Seas has always just been kind of my go-to map in the first place. And then on top of that, Astrologos, actually, Astrologos never returned. We're still in the Hidden Gorge, so they still haven't gotten a map back to us that we got rid of ages and ages and ages ago. So I don't know. It's a mixed bag as PvP tends to be in 14, but at least Crystalline Conflict was, I think, a shining point. Now, there are so many other things that I could talk about in this review, but I'm just going to kind of rattle off some of the other features that I guess more directly impacted my play experience. Like, I'm not going to talk about aquariums or even big fishing. You know, that's not going to be something that I really have much of a thing to add. I mean, crafting and gathering, I don't even do much, but at least I get the impression that that wasn't anything spectacular. I will say personally that I really like the in-menu math that's done for crafting now, and the quality of life on Collector's Glove is definitely welcome also. But then you have other features that are just sort of half there, half not. Adventure plates and portraits are a great addition, but the fine-tuning it needs to be better. It's so annoyingly finicky. Please, I hate it. Fashion accessories are a nice way to give some extra personality and flair to your player, especially when you're just hanging out in town. Treasure maps are always a pleasure, but I look forward to a new map type in 7.x. I was kind of hoping we would get one in 6.x, as we've kind of just had the doors and the roulette now for quite a while. We had the Fall Guys event, which should have been awesome. I was pumped for it, but the player base themselves wasted no time in ruining that one. Hey, at least we got Sylph Step, which was a nice little leap of faith addition that I definitely liked. The Relic quest being Tombstone only was also awful. Please don't do it again. And let me be clear, I think a Tombstone option is a good thing. A lot of players out there love to log in for roulettes, and they don't mind just getting a little bit of tomes, making some progress, making a couple of weapons, and calling it a day. I think that's fine in some capacity, but it is not exciting getting these weapons like this. Just another set of Tombstone weapons. It's just not great. We have an exploration zone coming in Dawn Trail, so I expect these will be there, but you know, this one just didn't work for me. Even though I really liked the appearances, even the final ones, which I know have been a bit divisive. But speaking of exploration zones, not having an exploration zone was awful. Huge downgrade after the sheer volume of content I got from Bosia and Shadowbringers and Eureka in Stormblood. Heck, I went back into Eureka a ton this expansion, and I recommend you do too. It's a good time. It's not nearly as bad as everyone thinks it is. I have a video guide. Go watch it. There's also so many finicky bugs and problems that we had throughout Endwalker. Housing glitch, the misbalance of Abyssos, the text and name mistakes were abound. Gameplay altering bugs like the Ninja Mudra bug that happened during Omega's release. Well, hopefully we just have less of occurrences like that throughout Dawn Trail as well, because those really put a damper on a lot of people's good times. We also had the MSQ reworks, which I thought were mostly awesome. There's definitely a few dungeons that miss the point, like Sorkai is in some ways cooler, in some ways way less cool, but yeah, for the most part, those worked out okay. Blue Mage updates, on the other hand, did not work out okay. Once again, it was incredibly underwhelming, and I don't know what they're really aiming for with that. Whether it be lack of rewards or just not a lot of content in general. It just feels like they're updating it because they have to. And then we have the 2-minute meta. I've said enough. Let's just get away from it. You know I don't like it. I don't have to say anything else. There was also tons of quality of life, you know, even if a few third-party tool users had to sacrifice themselves in order for us to get them. Hey, at least we did. We had cross-world travel and data center travel both being together, and that was, again, a double-edged sword. People migrate to specific locations for specific activities, leaving the uninformed to feel like their activity is dead and dated if they don't know where to go, or just as a new player in general. Really need a region-wide party finder and duty finder to help alleviate this issue. And it's something they seem aware of, so hopefully they'll address it in Dawn Trail. Now, again, this is far from everything I can make a specific comment on, but these are the pieces of content that I feel were most impactful to the overall experience throughout. That's not to say you have to agree with anything that I say, but I don't think Endwalker was nearly as bad as a lot of other people did. I'm someone who tends to see a lot of positives in places that people don't, and maybe that makes me sound a bit fanboyish, but I can't help if I actually just liked something. But I'm not, going against criticizing it where you don't like things. If there's bits that you found were too slow or the pacing was off, I encourage you to share those thoughts. I mean, there's a reason why we all have an opinion. It's just sometimes our opinions are a little more aggressive than others. So just wanted to share mine with you. Let me know what you think in the comment section of the video below. And if you want to write your own review in just a few short words for each of those little bits, I highly welcome you to do it. Just keep the conversation civil, I know it's kind of wasting my breath saying it, but hey, at least I tried. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see all of you in the next video. And until then, take care.